Wonderful to be here tonight. So I'm here with Becky, my young and inspiring colleague in the head office of the Norwegian Refugee Council. Just one word first on the Norwegian Refugee Council, NRC. We are, together with us, more than 12,000 colleagues spread around the world. The vast majority of our colleagues are in the worst places on earth because they serve and help 6 million refugees and internally displaced people. The reason we're able to reach more than 6 million people in these very difficult places, including Iraq, where I came back from this morning, is that we work with local staff. So Iraqis help other Iraqis, Afghans, other Afghans. And we are also seeing on the international level and in our head office that we are now able to get extraordinary talent because we recruit from the best. And among those are people who have a different background from us, Norwegians, who initiated this organization. So turning to you, Becky, your name is not Egeland or Bjelland, meaning that we're from small farms in Norway. You have a more interesting background. You come from where, really? Or you hail from where? You're a fellow Norwegian. You hail from where?
Yeah. Well, just to say what my last name is, it's Bakr Abdulla, which is a Sunni Muslim name, and it comes from the northern part of Iraq. Meaning my parents are Kurds. I'm born and raised in Norway. So one time, almost 30 years ago, they were displaced. They were refugees, and that's how I came here.
So they fled from northern Iraq to Norway as refugees. You were born and raised here. How did you end up in the Norwegian Refugee Council?
I think my parents' story of their hardship, coming from a life that was very, very good. Very similar story to a lot of the displaced people I've met myself. They had a great life, they had good careers, they had a newly built house, they had 2 small children, 2 and 5 years old. All of a sudden the war came. And the war changes everything, especially for civilians, especially for people like my parents. My mum was actually my age when her life was turned upside down, and she was forced to leave their home. A home, what is that for an individual? It's everything you hold dear, it's everything that's safe for you. It's the place you return to after long days of work thinking, oh, I'm home. That's very strong, a home. Their home was ruined. They had to leave everything behind. In the course of 24 hours, they decided that the lives of our children and our lives are now in danger, and our only solution is to leave behind absolutely everything we have built, everything we know, and everything we love, including our future plans, and leave. 24 hours later, they left over horseback over the mountains to Iran, with Iraqi flights bombing them. Very, very dangerous escape. Made it to Iran, where they were held as prisoners. The Iranians thought they were Iraqi spies. So, through Syria, who would have thought? Back then, Syria was a host nation for many, many Iraqi refugees. And then they finally made it to Norway and were embraced with open hearts, with open minds, and the Norwegian government, but also their Norwegian community and neighbors accepted them, and they invested in them, invested dignity in them and opportunities. And almost 30 years later, I'm here working alongside one of my biggest idols.
We're neighbors and the same floor, and you're a media advisor now in NRC, where you now travel the world for us as a spokesperson for the rights of refugees and internally displaced. And let's say if technology is with us now, look at the screen, because this is one of the many times Becky has now addressed world media, BBC, CNN, in this case, the Turkish international channel. Let's watch.
Becky, Bakr, Abdulla is from the Norwegian Refugee Council. She's been at a camp with families fleeing from Fallujah. She spoke about one woman who managed to flee on Monday.
She told me that they took off their shoes and their sandals as to not be heard when they escaped. They used big drainage pipes to hide behind until they finally got to safety and managed to escape out.
So you're back 30 years after your parents escaped to Iraq. Now a spokesperson to world media for new generations of displaced in Iraq. And in this case, you were in Fallujah. What happened?
Well, the Fallujah offensive, which was an offensive that the Iraqi military launched May last year, 2016, was one of many offensives they launched in order to retake ISIS-held areas. ISIS had 2 years before, in 2014, taken over large cities overnight almost, such as Mosul and Fallujah, which I'm sure you all remember seeing in the news. We had a situation, a caseload that NRC was working on of 85,000 civilian women, men, children, who we knew were now trapped. They were trapped in direct crossfire between ISIS doing their best to retain the control and then Iraqi and coalition forces bombing and attacking from ground. What does this leave? You know, it's an urban warfare, meaning that people were trying to find safety and shelter in their own homes, but it of course also means massive scales of human suffering.
And this advocacy work, of course, helps us on many levels. It helps us raise money. Now from 40 nations and international organizations invest in our relief because they see what we do, what you and others have done in the field. But also it helps getting parties in the field, Iraqi forces, Iraqi parties to the war, behave better. Time is flying, Becky. What would be your hope for the future? What would you like to do in the future?
For me, it's extremely important to be given the opportunity to continue the work that we are doing. NRC's public advocacy, the work that you, Jan, and me and other spokespersons do is extremely important. In the case of Fallujah, we saw that all the media interviews that I was giving on ground, in addition to all the high-level meetings you are attending, pushing out the same messages, saying that people are dying, they need our support now, actually paid off. We were giving millions of more money from states such as France and the US. In addition to that, when the next offensive started towards Mosul, it was a much more coordinated response because our messages was getting out there. So my hope for the future is for more nations, more neighborhoods, more organizations to allow people like my parents, people like me, who come from a different background, to allow for them to also invest the background they've got, because it is a bridge builder and it can lead to a better response.
And my hope for the future is that we are able to draw more systematically on the resources that you and the other refugees and ex-refugees and second-generation refugees and diaspora groups represent. I said earlier today, Albert Einstein was a refugee, but perhaps more representative for all of us are those Somalis that we now send to Somalia. I'm ending, by saying that the current prime minister in Somalia, who try desperately to get Somalia on a better course, very difficult. He came as an asylum seeker to a remote part of inner Norway called Valdres. He was there as an asylum seeker. He ended up as a field worker for the Norwegian Refugee Council. Little by little, he rose up to become the regional director for the Horn of Africa with a $100 million program. And today, he is the prime minister in Somalia, the country he fled from. And I hope he will succeed. And we can draw on the resources of refugees that would make it much better world for all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Becky.